Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. We are so excited to have you join us today for our, I believe, fifth For Educators by Educators conversation this summer. If you've been able to join us for some previous For Educators by Educators conversations, we are having a series of summer conversations, summer webinar conversations about hot topics that educators face on a daily basis in the classroom. We are pulling together educators from within Riverside Insights to talk about real issues that educators, students, teachers are all facing in the classroom, and some practical tips from our own experience in the classroom for things that might help. And so we're really excited to have this conversation with you all today, and would love to encourage a lot of participation if possible throughout our conversation. So today's topic, we're so excited, is on being creative and amplifying student potential. And we have a stellar a stellar group of panelists today who are all going to share some of their expertise and their insights from being in the classroom for years. And so I'll have them introduce themselves shortly. Before we get started, though, wanted to highlight that after today, we have two more For Educator by Educator conversations coming up. We have one next week on building the bridge between special ed and gen ed, and then one on August 3rd about advancing equity in your classrooms. So we hope that if you enjoyed today's conversation, you will sign up for the future sessions as well. And even if you cannot attend live, if you sign up, we will be sure to send you a recording after. If you've missed one of our conversations, you can check out the previous conversations either on our website by going to riversideinsights.com and clicking webinars and events at the top, or checking out our YouTube channel, going to Riverside Insights, and you'll see the different sessions that we've had over the past couple of weeks. So with that, we are so excited to kick off today's conversation. And we have three of our panelists right here. One is having technical issues, and she is joining back with us hopefully momentarily. But wanted to give an opportunity for my colleagues at Riverside to introduce themselves, share a little bit about who they are, what their current role is, and their experience in the classroom, and why they care about this topic of engaging students to reach their full potential. Ah, there's Tina. She was able to join back on and get her video working, so that's perfect. So Paulette, would you mind kicking it off? So what you're doing now, your experience in education, and why you care about this topic.
Well, of course I care. I was a teacher back in the 70s in the classroom, first teaching third graders in a rural town in Connecticut, and then incarcerated youth in a prison. I did that for 6 years. So creativity was really important. But when I was teaching, there wasn't as much emphasis on teaching to the standards or testing. So we were tasked a lot of times with creating our own curriculum. And I really love integrating all the subject areas and like a whole experience. So when I was in Connecticut, 1 year it was Native American culture. The second year we did environmental protection, saving the animals. And it was great to like build lessons and activities around math would be like making their costumes, making teepees, cooking. We cooked all kinds of recipes, and then the kids were, we lived in the rural part, so we do little field trips to learn about the animals. And then at the end of each year, we do a whole presentation for the parents. So at the end, it was really funny with the animals. Each one was an animal, and they got very emotional about their animal. And then they said at the end, if pollution comes, their animals are all going to die. So they like started like falling on the floor. And the parents, that was like kind of good and bad, but it was really fun. And one of the things I always did was bring fun.
I love it.
Every day in every way, dancing, singing songs. And so, yeah, it was a lot of fun being in elementary, but I've been here for a long time. So I try to have as much fun as I can helping our educators all over the country, really bring out the best in their students. And I work with a lot of smaller schools and districts. So I'm enjoying this part of my career too.
Thank you so much, Paulette. And I can't wait to learn a little bit more about what you did in the classroom. Rita, would you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. I have been at Riverside for 6 years, and right now I'm in the product management role, managing some of our distributed products. And I was a teacher for 10 years, primarily in the middle school gifted literature and art area. So I saw kids from first grade through 8th grade on a daily, regular basis. And I just found that with creativity, it, art, you normally think of that as a creative outlet, but I found that I used it more in literature, and it's not just because the kids were gifted. It was just how I found that by using that creativity in the classroom, it was really essential to keeping the kids engaged and happy in the lessons. And it just made for a much more enjoyable classroom experience by adding that creativity and giving the kids the choice. So I liked doing that.
Amazing. Well, I can't wait to hear more shortly. Allison, turning it over to you.
Sure. I'm Allison Boydman. I've been at Riverside just a few years now. I was a classroom teacher for 9 years. I taught fourth and fifth grade, and then taught 6th grade math and reading. And then I spent 8 years at the district level in assessment, and really helping teachers understand their assessment data from interim, district, nationally normed assessments and things of that nature. And I really love this topic because my whole goal was to make learning fun, and not just fun for students, but fun for the teacher as well, and fun for being in the classroom. And so I had students from mixed abilities, especially in science and social studies in my homeroom. And it was really important to me to bring the unique learning and unique experiences of every student into my classroom, and to make sure that every student was engaged in the curriculum and engaged in the standards. And yes, the standards give us the what to teach, but the how to teach really comes from the teacher. So that's where I had a lot of leeway. And yeah, I got kids very excited through a lot of projects. We did making guitars out of paper towel rolls and cardboard boxes and rubber bands, and all about learning pitch and learning about sound. And through math, fractions, adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing. It's hard for upper elementary, but we made it fun with recipes, and every student had to bring in, they had to make a recipe, and they had to use the fractions to make enough for 32 students in the class, and do a sample, and then we put together a whole cookbook. So I have lots more to share here, but that's really what this is about, making teaching fun, but making the learning fun too, bringing it alive. So.
Oh, I love that, Allison. And you bring up such a good point that I know we'll talk about shortly, but about incorporating student strengths. Like, this is really about ensuring that you have a classroom environment where every student feels safe and comfortable to succeed, and that they are, aware of what their own personal interests and strengths are and can leverage those to learn. So powerful. Tina, last but not least.
Hi, my name is Christina Jordan, and I was an elementary classroom teacher for 25 years before I ventured out into the ed tech world. One of the reasons this topic is so important to me is because as a classroom teacher, when I started, I had a lot of freedom to do creative things in my classroom, and then more and more that was sort of taken away, and we were so focused on assessment and the test scores. And in the state in which I live, schools get money based on how the kids perform on their state tests, and so it became more and more about the test than it did about being creative. And it made my job less fun, and it made my students' job in the classroom less fun. So I think we kind of had to get creative about being creative, if that makes sense. We used to, I taught 5th grade for a long time, and we used to do, when we did ecosystems, our entire hallway was, we would assign different ecosystems to the kids in 5th grade, and they got to have like free range for how they wanted to. So you would walk down the halls of the school and you'd be in a rainforest and you'd be in the ocean and you'd be like, and we gave the kids freedom to do that. And it was one of their favorite things to do in the year. And then the fire marshal said we couldn't do that anymore. So that's when we had to start getting creative about being creative. But you know, and just like what you said, playing on what's interesting to the kids and their strengths. I had a group of students one year that came up to me and they said, Mrs. Jordan, my neighbor is selling a fish tank at a garage sale for $10. If we buy it, can we have it in the classroom? Okay, great. And it turned into this whole, like, they put a money jar, they were putting pennies in there. And when they were looking up like different fish and how they live in different environments and how they interact with each other. And they would like put money in and send me to the fish store when they had enough money to buy the fish that they Googled. So, you know, I mean, it was nothing I ever planned on doing, but they wanted to do it, so we went with it. So I think you have to be flexible and roll with your class. And like I said, be creative about being creative, because it's not just about test scores.
Oh, so many good points there. So before we kick off with like a broader discussion, would love to hear from our audience and hear from the people that are here in the webinar with us. If you have the opportunity, we'd love for you to drop in the Q&A or the chat. How are you currently allowing your students to be creative in the classroom? What are you doing to bring out the fun, to infuse, to engage their strengths, to engage their interests? So if you wouldn't mind just dropping into the chat, I would love to shout out what some of our attendees are actually doing in the classroom shortly throughout our discussion, because you all have some of the best practices and we would love to be able to share those with everyone else. So I think the first question that, you know, we were talking about last week when we were kind of thinking about this topic that I'd love to start with is, I know at least when I was a teacher, I was scared of losing control and like scared of providing, giving students too much autonomy to be creative and have fun in the classroom, because I was scared of kind of what would happen with like behavior or if they would actually learn the material. And I think I learned the hard way that that's actually kind of the reverse, like that's the wrong way of thinking, that actually providing more opportunity to be creative actually would engage my students more. I would love to hear your thoughts on that. Like, how do you balance, you know, this need to be creative and engage your students with still, you know, feeling empowered as a teacher and to ensure that your students are learning what they need to learn? Tina, would you mind kicking it off for us with that?
Sure. So that is a tough one, right? Because you do want, there are times when they need to sit, right? But sometimes I use those free times more as a reward, like, hey, everyone in the class, you know, we cannot get to the fun part till we get through this. So work with me on this and then we can get to the fun part. And, you know, I actually, I think I was telling you all on the panel here the other day, there's one student that keeps coming to my mind, and he loved to tell jokes and rap, and he was actually a little bit of a distraction in my class, right? So I would say, if you sit through this and this, at the end of the week, I will give you 10 minutes to do a comedy routine, or I will give you 10 minutes to do a rap. But it has to be around, like, if you do a rap, do it around what we learned in school this week. And he loved that. Well, then what do you think happened? Everybody was like, well, I can do a poem, and it's great, but do it around something that we learned this week. And it could be about like rules on the playground, or it could have been about science or math. And, you know, so and you do just kind of have to let go a little bit, because in the end, in that chaos comes learning and comes, you know what, and the mess is the mess. You got to just let it go a little.
Anna, I love listening to Tina's class memories. It sounds like a TV show. But one of the things that I think that we can leverage, you know, we all talk about the power of assessments and data and how we have to use what's meaningful. One of the things that we've been talking a lot about in our company is using the data from each student to either stretch, you know, to get to where their proficiency is, or and they already like have talents, so how can we expand them or support them, because maybe these students need some instructional support. So how about if we use the data in a very creative way, because each student is working at their own level, and perhaps as a teacher we could really work harder to identify like ways that this isn't just learning fractions, but what are they going to do? Are they going to bring in the recipe and provide some cookies for everybody? They're going to go out and make a birdhouse, you know, and show how they use that skill. Are they going to do a science project and then show us how to grow our vegetables and bring them in? So there's many things that they could do, and they have to like write their own individual plan. So let's take that that actual standard and skill and the level that they're working on, and have them, it's a cooperative way to make a plan of how they're going to execute it.
I love that, Paulette. Yeah, with the assessment piece too. I feel like in terms of the control piece, a lot of what I did was create rubrics. And so providing students those rubrics at the beginning of projects that we did, water cycle comic strip, for example, ecosystem project we did, a lot of cross-curricular, but going over with them, you know, here are the standards that I know that we need to learn, and then here's how, you know, you need to incorporate it into the project. And that kind of keeps the control with the teacher in terms of, I'm going to make sure the student understands the standard, but then gives a lot of flexibility to the student, because it's like how you want to show. Do you want to demonstrate it through, you know, a performance, through a rap song maybe, or through a PowerPoint, or through a poster, you know, all the different ways that they can show, but it's giving the student some autonomy in how they're going to demonstrate, but then also the teacher doesn't feel like I've given up all the control in the class, right? I'm still going to get what I need out of it to assess their learning, but the student has a lot of free reign too.
That's such a good point, Allison, because, you know, it's really interesting. We've had some comments come in the chat that I'd love to shout out, but they're all revolving around helping students understand their own interests and strengths and take control of their own learning. You know, Abby talks about, Abby Rogers, thanks for sharing. You said you work with struggling readers, and you work to listen to their interests to spark their desire to read more about a topic. So you use a lot of interest-based learning in your literacy instruction. That's so powerful. And Leslie talks about putting together choice boards as well, so that her students can really ensure that they are learning and showing their learning in a way that is meaningful to them. And then Tiana, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. I think this is so powerful, talks about helping students express themselves based on their culture. So she even had them rewrite Romeo and Juliet based on where they were from. And so leveraging culture and leveraging, you know, students' backgrounds in a way that's really productive to their learning as well. I think that is so powerful. So yeah, so powerful. And, you know, I think this all ties into, like, we've had some conversations recently about social emotional learning, and one of our, you know, For Educators by Educators conversations was on that. And, you know, part of, to me, like, becoming an adult is like learning what you're good at and learning what you're not as strong at, learning where your interests are, and learning how to take control of your own learning. And so I think providing a lot of choice and opportunities for engagement and creativity in the classroom actually not only enhances your academic growth, but also helps your personal growth, and like helps you develop into an adult that can take responsibility for your own learning and development. Rita, what about you? Like, how did you infuse this on a daily basis in your classroom?
Yeah, a lot of it is, you know, repeat. I really did give the kids choice. So after a literature unit as a culminating activity, they would usually, you know, I'd kind of follow Bloom's taxonomy and use, you know, one of those create, design, imagine, suppose words, and then they could either choose one of the projects that I might have listed as an option, or they had the option of coming to me and asking what kind of project like would relate to it. And I think a lot of times too, it was bringing in games, whether I related a game to a unit, or like a crazy game we did when we were doing Hunger Games was we actually did a whole survival thing out in the thing, and they were collecting, and how do you do that? And so it is giving up, like a little bit of control, and poor janitors climbing up on roofs to get arrows that we shot.
Yeah.
So, there is all of that, with just giving the kids choices on what they like, but then making them stretch also, where it's tiered and saying, okay, you might have done this last time, let's shoot for another tier on what you're going to do with a rubric or with the lesson. So and also even just letting them collaborate with each other. A lot of times too, when I would be in classrooms and I would teach math, I would, kind of go over the lesson, what needed to be done, but then I would let them pair up with each other, talk about the math lesson, share their ideas on how would you solve this? A lot of times the kids are better teachers, and they'll listen much more to what a fellow classmate has to say than sometimes what I have to say. And so it is recognizing that too, the kids have so much value. And that was the one thing I really liked about teaching. I felt like there were so many days I learned just as much or more than the kids did. Like, they were teaching me new things also. And because of model, like trying to solve a problem or modeling something, I would dig deep into it. And if we give kids that opportunity to dig in on their own, also they're going to learn too. So it is giving them choices and options. And
Rita, you brought up a great issue. I think that I remember school, and even when being a teacher and also being a parent, there was so much collaboration between kids, and then all of a sudden the devices have taken over a lot of their lives. So really it is so important for them to learn from each other who they are, some people complement each other. Like, some people are really stronger in other areas. So connecting kids up and putting them with kids who are very complementary. And then also the art of conversation. I mean, I've been in around middle school kids, and they're sitting next to each other, texting each other.
Yeah.
And to me, they really need to learn how to talk about their feelings and communicate. That is such a big skill for social emotional learning, and also multicultural learning. My daughter went to a school, there were 140 countries represented in the school. It was fabulous. It was the best experience that anybody could ever have. And we all got together with people from all over the world every day, and it was great. So multicultural, and also talking, getting to know each other.
The collaboration piece. I love that, Paulette and Rita. In terms of how exactly how students have to learn to work together, towards a project, towards a goal, right? But it brings in those soft skills of leadership and decision making and planning and organization and all of those skills that are needed even out in the working world. But it's in a very safe environment in the classroom. You've got one project that needs to be completed, one activity to do together, but then it really kind of brings out with the students, like, how do I work with children of all cultures and children who are different from me, in terms of getting the goal complete. So I did team building activities their first week of school, and it was very simple. No, there weren't even necessarily a standard involved necessarily, but it was purely, we're going to have to work together all year, so we need to learn to collaborate. And it was just with marshmallows and toothpicks and gummies and build a
Yeah,
structure.
you were mentioning that like it's just with simple tools or materials. Yeah.
Exactly. Just a fun way, in the end, it was just, no real standard tied to it, but just those soft skills again, of how students collaborate. So you have to bring that up.
One of our participants, Abby, just dropped this in, and I wanted to shout this out because I think this is a great idea. She did multiple intelligences lesson and survey at the start of each year in her second grade class, and so she used this as an opportunity to actually help students identify their own strengths, and then used also the information to be able to better plan activities throughout the year. And I think that's so powerful. I when I was teaching, I taught in a very low income community, and I could never figure out when I was teaching why we would be able to catch our kids up throughout the year, but then they would get to high school or college and really, really, really struggle. And they were on grade level and everything like that. And I think one of the things I kept coming back to is they were never taught or never allowed to really learn self-advocacy. They were never taught, or we were so focused on, unfortunately, like skills-based instruction throughout the year, that they were never really taught and allowed and given the freedom to advocate for themselves. And so when they got to college and they weren't understanding something, like they didn't really know to go to office hours or know what it looked like to walk up to a professor and say, hey, I need help. And I think that a lot of what y'all have brought up is just not only allowing students to be creative in the classroom, but then using the lens of creative activities to teach students how to really learn how to advocate for themselves, how to learn what their strengths are, how to learn what their interests are, and how to learn to express themselves in a way that is relevant to who they are as an individual.
That's a great example.
I think also making it safe for them to know that it's okay to not be the best at everything, right? And so there are going to be times when you're given an assignment and maybe you're not the best writer. Maybe that's not your strength, but you can still produce something at your level of creativity. And so I love to sing, but I have a horrible voice, but I love to sing. So I used to like make up songs and sing things to help my kids remember like math formulas and things. And they would just they're like, Mrs. Jordan, stop your voice. And I'm like, I know, but it's okay. It's not my strength, but I'm having fun. Or when I'm also not an artist, like stick people, great. Beyond that, not so much. So I would sort of show them like my weaknesses and say, it's okay. I can still do it. I can still have fun. I'm not going to be the best at everything. Ask me to write a paper. That's going to be my strength. I will give you the best paper ever. It'll be creative, but drawing, singing, but it's okay. I'm still going to do it. So I kind of made myself foolish because I wanted them to know that it's okay to not be the best at everything. And it doesn't mean you still can't deliver something that's creative. And like Allison said, giving them that rubric, as long as you're hitting those points, it doesn't have to be a masterpiece every time, right?
Yeah, you don't have to be perfect, right? That's a great
and
lesson.
what I would say too, I'm sorry, and what Tina just had to say is a lot of it is taking risk is with being creative, that you have to be willing to take a risk to show off that creativity, even though it might not always be comfortable. And the other thing I liked about that with creativity and taking risk is sometimes when the students did some of that, it was awe-inspiring for myself and for the other students to see what they were able to do and perform. Like I definitely saw kids who were able to sometimes paint better than me, and poems like that would just sum up the whole activity that were just amazing, because that was a talent, that was a natural strength and ability that they had, and they could really show that off. And that was so wonderful to see and watch.
Would love to ask y'all, because I think we've talked a lot about and have thrown out some great ideas about how to infuse creativity and engagement in the classroom. What if you're a district leader or a school leader? Like, how do you support your teachers or your schools with developing more opportunities for student creativity? Like, how do we think about this from like a systematic or process-oriented perspective? Allison, do you mind kicking it off? Because I know we worked for a while at like the district level.
I did. I think it's really teachers can be trusted in terms of here's the standards and here's the learning, but embracing it and really from a school perspective, leadership perspective, going around to the classes and showcasing, you know, look at what these classes have put together. One of the things that I did as a teacher, but I think from administration level was fun to visit, was as a group of 5th grade teachers, we did Colonial Day and we did Western Day. And it was really a Native American Potlatch Day. And it was really about collaborating as a team, as a grade level. And students would go from one classroom to the next. And we did have some parent volunteers help, but they would make things that were, you know, based on the like Colonial Day, for example, making butter and making corn husk dolls and things. You know, how was school back then? Making journals and making feather pens and things like that. But it was all about getting all of the teachers involved and with the standards involved too, but really the collaboration. So spotlighting from an administration perspective, you know, today is Colonial Day and every student and all the teachers were all dressed up and showcasing that in the newsletter of the school, you know, something that goes out to parents and an email, but just how much fun students are having, but they're learning at the same time. That's really powerful.
And Anna, I will say too, at the district level, I think principals and administrators really need to then embrace more of the idea of, you know, problem-based learning and tying units and structures in together and letting teachers know that it is okay and to plan time for problem-based learning, that if they're talking, it doesn't mean that learning isn't taking place. Because I think sometimes there's that big misconception that, oh, well, they just look like they're talking and playing around and so that they're not learning, but a lot of learning is taking place about the topic and about other skills and developments like we have mentioned that need to happen just for life skills.
Yeah.
And Anna, I think it has to do with the values, you know, the mission statement of each district, and hopefully the district will realize that bringing the whole child is their goal, you know, not just the scores. And that comes from really making a commitment to like those kinds of mission statements and living them. So getting the right leaders in is so important.
One of our attendees dropped in that she is a school leader, and she builds in opportunities for different classes to go and present to other classes. So, or different students to go to other classes and present. And I think that's a great, you know, systematic way to infuse love of learning and creativity and engagement in your whole school. I love that idea.
It also builds that whole school community too.
It does.
Because sometimes those 5th graders are really big and scary if you're a 1st grader, right? So building that whole school community and that bond between grade levels, that's great.
We had International Day at our school too, where it was a parent event. So in the evening, but having students showcase their different cultures through dance, music, food, art, all that they did in school, but then got to showcase it at night. So another great way to infuse the creativity.
Yeah,
I think that's great. Go ahead, Paulette.
No, I was just going to say that that I think that you can walk into a school. When I was traveling for Houghton Mifflin, I used to visit. Actually, I went to Minnesota a lot. I could tell the minute I walked into a school that this school has great creativity and leadership. You can almost feel it, you know, just in culture. And it was really a privilege to like spend days at different schools, and it was a great part of my learning.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Paulette. I work very closely on the board with a school in New York, and one of the things that has always struck me about this school is is how they infuse their mission and their values on a day-to-day basis. It is an international baccalaureate school, and they are 100% focused on building, global citizens. And so they prioritize, academics are obviously very important, and that is one of their top priorities, but they infuse arts and dance and orchestra and community engagement and all of these different elements and classes throughout the day, in every grade level. And so they're literally from like a school level living out their mission in the way that they are designing the school day. And I think like every single decision you're making from a school leadership perspective or a district perspective actually it has the opportunity to really lean into what your mission is or what your values are, or how you're trying to educate your children, the students in your school, and can really do a lot to shaping, these students that we're trying to educate. So, well, believe it or not, we are almost out of time, but I wanted to see if anyone had any last minute thoughts about creativity, engaging students in the classroom, or if you're still with us on this webinar, if you have any practical tips that we didn't share, that if you want to drop in the Q&A, would love to shout them out in these last couple of minutes. But do any of our panelists have any last minute thoughts for what this looks like on a day-to-day basis, or anything we didn't touch on?
I do. I just wanted to share two things in terms of field trips. I know when I was in the classroom, I think maybe budget cuts now, but we definitely did some field trips to different places. And so that was just one idea to give that creativity, visiting a university, visiting a nature center, things of that nature. But now virtual field trips, my own children have them. So you can, get a Zoom call with somebody at the nature center, for example, and talking about animals and, some part of their curriculum. So that's just an idea. And then guest speakers, having the parents in the school, maybe who are in careers, an accountant to talk about money and learning money and things like that. My own dad used to come in and talk about outer space, because that's the field in which he was in when we talked about planets. So just two more ideas of how else to infuse others, because sometimes you see the teacher every day, but it's nice to have a fresh face sometimes with learning curriculum. So
I just wanted to promote the power of community service and giving back. In our high school in my town, you have to have a certain number of community service hours, and and they even have like a person organizing all the programs. It's probably the most exciting part of the whole school curriculum at the high school, and the kids really learn the value of giving back too. So I'd like to promote that.
Yeah, and to piggyback on what Allison said, I used to run something at our school called Kids College, and we started with just 5th grade, and then it became a school-wide thing, and it was a lot of work putting it together, but it was one of the favorite days of the school. And we would go out, and everybody who came in for that, we would shut down the school for the entire afternoon. Nobody would do just their regular curriculum, and weeks before we would send out a course offering, and kids could sign up. And there'd be a syllabus, and they could sign up, and it was all volunteers from the community. So we had like a food scientist from Nestle come in. My sister, who is like a amateur photographer, would come in and do a photography class. We'd have the fire department come in. I mean, just really, really cool things that spanned a wide range of activities, and they were all academically based activities, but they were coming from people out in the community, and it was great. I mean, like I said, it took a big team and a lot of work to put it together, but it was the favorite day at the school.
Great.
And I was just going to say the same thing, starting off that Allison had said, that I felt bringing in guest speakers, just tying in however I could to the real world, anything that we had done in a book study. So if it was a multicultural unit and we were covering Vietnam, I had my father-in-law come in and talk about the Vietnam War and how that was. Or if they sewed something, we would practice, like how did you sew the purse? So it's just giving kids the opportunity to do whatever is, presented, and giving them some choices.
I love that. Well, so many great ideas and great perspective on this call. Thank you so much to our audience who was very engaged throughout this conversation and dropped some of their own ideas in the Q&A. We really appreciate all of your insights, and I wish I could go back and teach again tomorrow, because I now would have a much more engaged class with all of your feedback and your ideas. So really appreciate taking the time to join us today. If you're an audience member, and for our panelists, thank you for taking the time today to share your expertise on this topic of engaging students and enabling them to be creative in the classroom. We hope you're able to join us for our final 2 For Educators by Educators conversations next Wednesday and the Wednesday following. You can register on our website at riversideinsights.com, and we hope to see you there. But please reach out if you have any further questions, and we'll be in touch with some follow-up resources that you can leverage in your school or your district. But we really appreciate you taking the time today, and we look forward to hopefully seeing you next Wednesday. Have a great afternoon, everyone.
Thanks, Anna.
Thank you.